In this video, I'm going to tell you about art in tabletop wargaming and why it's important to you. So I think a lot about art. That's kind of part of my thing. And Vince and I, Vince Venturella, we've been talking about art now for months with the production of our new game, which just came out this past Friday, Space Station Zero. You can check it out. Pachow. So we've been going back and forth a lot about art as we've been getting things ready to go. There's lots of amazing art in our book, which we're very happy about, and people seem to like it. But recently, when I was trying to brainstorm an idea for this week's video, as I've mentioned, I've been a bit frazzled lately with the production and the travel. And as you see this video coming out on Friday, I'm in Washington, D.C. for the Nova Open. If you're there, say hi. But anyway, while going through all this stuff and chatting with Vince during one of our meetings and trying to come up with an idea, he suggested the idea that we're going to go through right here. So, thanks, Vince, and here we go. Art is very important in miniatures wargaming. Now, there's a lot of things that are important in miniatures wargaming. Rules, super important. For some people, lore, different stuff like that. Miniatures, even then, in those situations. But the art, I find to be very important in a good miniatures wargaming rule set. Now, I know sometimes as designers that we wish that it weren't so important because, frankly, it's very difficult and it's expensive. It's difficult because you have to find the right artist who does the right kind of artwork for the thing you're trying to convey with your game. If you find an artist who does amazing skeletons, just super cool, crazy looking, dead, dry, icky skeletons, and then you're like, hey, I want you to draw a whole bunch of cute little halflings who have made a war game about who can cook the best stew, that's probably not the best choice. You see what I'm saying, right? So finding the right artist who will work with you and all that kind of stuff, has the time to do it as well. Artists are very busy. Good artists are very busy these days, and just fits with your thing. It's a lot of work, and it's also expensive. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't be. Good art, you should pay for it. It should definitely be expensive, and it makes sense. But many Kickstarters out there, when they're going to be making some sort of new rule set, hey, we're making some sort of new miniature rule set, miniature wargaming rule set, and they do a Kickstarter, very frequently the money is not being raised so they can write the rule set. Very frequently the rule set's written. What they're getting money together for is to be able to pay artists to make it look really good. Sometimes it's sculpting. It depends on what kind of rule set it is and whether it's got an attached miniature line. But really, much of what the money raising going forward in a lot of games is it's going into the art. And art does far more, honestly, than just draw eyeballs to the book, though it very much does do that as well. As you're looking through, your online website for whatever, or you're there at the store and you're looking on the shelves, good artwork, specifically on the cover, does draw your eyes, and you open it up and start looking through, and there's even better artwork. That does definitely help. But it does more than that. So why do I care, I hear you saying, which is maybe a little harsh. You should dial it back just a touch. Decent artwork is probably more important to your enjoyment of a tabletop miniatures wargame than you might think, right? Think of a popular game, a popular tabletop wargame out there that has no art, or maybe has a little bit of art but not very much, or it's kind of uninspiring art. If you can come up with a popular wargame out there with no art to it, or like I said, really kind of sort of uninspiring art, put it in the comments below because I want to hear it. Now, here's the deal. Historicals might not count. And this is nothing against historicals. It's actually a benefit that historicals have. History already usually has imagery, right? So if you're playing a game of, Napoleonic stuff, there are so many paintings out there, famous, paintings from the day and whatnot. There's history books full of what would be called lore in normal wargaming, but is actually just straight up history, whatever. Maybe it's even photographs if it's something from like World War I, World War II. I think, world in Vietnam, like, more recent conflicts and stuff like that. Whatever kind of game that you are doing that has to do with actual history, there is generally imagery out there. So you could very probably write a game for, let's say, World War II and either not use any art at all because people kind of know what World War II looks like, right? Or you could very potentially use imagery from World War II, photos and things like that and stuff like that. Maybe some of those things are no longer copyright. They've gone past their 75-year thing, or all kinds of different stuff. You've got options as a designer. And as a player, you're seeing stuff and you know in your head what World War II is, so it's fine. But when we're talking about fantastical games, stuff like fantasy, elves and swords and, magic and whatnot, or sci-fi, spaceships and laser guns and all that, it's really hard to get away with like no art at all. What art does to a miniatures war game is it ignites imagination for the cinematics that are in your head as you are playing. It is immersion. It's really about the immersion. Now, fancy models, well done, well sculpted, well painted, all that kind of stuff, well based. Terrain, very nicely constructed, fully painted, the whole deal. The boards, the actual thing that all this stuff sits on. That stuff all obviously helps very much with immersion. It really does. But the story, very frequently what was known as lore, or sometimes fluff, depends on who you talk to, is important, but so is the artwork. It's really what does most of the heavy lifting when it comes to immersion. When you are having a hard time seeing this in your head, and you can just open up the book and go, oh, now I can see it with my eyes, it really does help. Good artwork also really helps you when it gets down to the actual physicality of it, you building and painting your miniatures. If you're building the models that are meant to go with this game, a game where here's the rule set and we also sell the models that go along with the rule set, that still doesn't mean that you're not going to maybe kind of take some of these models and try to maybe pose them, kind of move them around. Maybe you have to cut, like if they're monopose, you cut an arm and decide to rejigger it and move it in a different direction or whatever, because you're trying to follow along with some really cool piece of artwork from the book. You want this guy to look like this guy from the book, right? So, that's something that definitely can help inspire you in your hobby journey as you are building and all the different models. And then, of course, there's also, the paint jobs. If there are a lot of different interesting kind of color schemes or uniform layouts or whatever the deal is in the book that you can see and go, oh, those guys are the guys that I like, I'm going to paint my guys like that army. You now have a reference to work from, that color scheme, all that kind of stuff. Beyond even that, what style are you going to paint in? Like, think about John Blanche from, Warhammer 40,000. He's a famous illustrator that did tons of work for kind of back in the day, Warhammer 40,000. And he has actually, his illustrations have spawned an entire kind of art movement within the actual miniature painting community. It's known as Blanchitsu, and it follows kind of his color palette and kind of his style and all that kind of stuff. I've talked about that a little bit before, Pachow. But even a good illustrator with a very interesting style can actually kind of change the way that you paint, and all of this comes from good art. And if you're interested in the same type of thing that I am, which is mini-agnostic games, then referencing the art that comes in the book can be very, very important to many people, because there are mini-agnostic games can be difficult for some folks, because there's not just like a simple choice of what models to buy. Like, oh, here's a bunch of pictures of the models that we sell. They're in this army book or codex or whatever. I know what to go to the store and I know what to pick up. That totally makes sense. Mini-agnostic games don't have that. Now, many people see that as freeing because you get to then use whatever kind of models you want. And I've talked about mini-agnostic games a lot. You guys have probably kind of paid attention to some of that, I'm hoping. But some folks get really paralyzed by choice when picking their models, because there's STLs for 3D printing out there. There's kit bashing and all kinds of things you can mix together to make a completely new model. There's companies out there that make models that don't have any game attached to them. And there's so many of them, worldwide, and you have the internet. You can find most of them, and get them to ship stuff to your house. It's a lot and a lot of choice. So having good artwork with strong direction can really help the people who are interested in buying your game, because they are really going to help get you understanding like what kind of models should I be looking for out there on the World Wide Web or at my local shop. And if you're a person who's like not a designer at all, but just like, I love the concept of this game, but I don't know what models I should use because it's mini agnostic, looking at good artwork in the book can really, really be something that can make you kind of like classify what you're looking for out there on the internet. If the game has great, compelling artwork, that's where you should start as a person trying to figure out what should my models look like in this mini agnostic game. Find models that look like the artwork and start there. Now, it seems generally obvious that good art is better than bad art, or even no art, really, in tabletop wargaming. However, understanding that it's not just there to look pretty, but it's there to inspire, inform, and immerse the player, getting them even more into the game. If there's a game out there that you feel like you should be interested in, you like, I should really be like this. This is like, the story seems interesting, the rule set is very cool, or whatever. But there's just something about it that it just doesn't stick with you. You're like, I don't understand why I don't seem to just really gel with this game. Take a look at the artwork in the rules book, and maybe on the website, stuff like that. Take a look at the artwork that's affiliated with this game. You might, that might be what's causing your ambivalence, to be perfectly honest. You might even want to go out if you like, the artwork is terrible on this, but everything else I think I should like. Maybe go out onto the internet and find good similar artwork out there, and then put that all together in a folder, or make it your wallpaper on your screen, for your computer, or your laptop, or whatever. Go out there to help inspire you with some good art to maybe play and model and paint more for that game that you're like, I really want to get into this, but it's not sticking. Or, honestly, just maybe find a game with better art. I think a lot about art, so I hope that this helped you to maybe start thinking about it a little bit more within your tabletop miniature wargaming as well. Maybe it'll help it so that you're more immersed in your game, or at least you just start looking at games with a slightly more critical eye, right? If this was helpful in any way, or maybe informational, entertaining, inspiring, whatever, if you liked it, click the like button down below. I appreciate that. It helps the channel a bunch, and it's free. And subscribe if you haven't. Thanks for watching.